Thank you, everyone, for still being here. Hi. Okay. I'm Najah. I'm a senior studying global public health and sociology with minors in dance and Spanish. I'm also the only CAS queen representing, so woo! um, my summer research is around exploring the creation of the Clemente Soto Valles Cultural and Educational Center, allowing factors that allow them to build and promote Puerto Rican and Latinx culture in the Lower East Side, or as Lau put it, Lower East Side. Located on the corner of Delancey and Essex Street, the Clemente's mission is to provide affordable working spaces to venues, artists, and small business and organizations, emergent and independent community producers that reflect the cultural diversity of Louisiana, while also cultivating and presenting and preserving Puerto Rican and Latinx culture. Their mission serves a community that provides a multi-ethnic horizon, so the inclusivity is approached at a really incredible way throughout the organization. Clemente Soto Valles himself is an incredible figure. He pioneered the way to social justice and access to the arts from Puerto Rico to the United States. He was orphaned at just 7 years old and studied chemical engineering and business administration during college. He spent the rest of his life as a writer and a social activist that went to jail many times on account of social justice and founded organizations like the Puerto Rican Merchants Association here in New York City. That upheld his beliefs in equity and representation. He wanted to provide a voice for Latinx artists that wasn't represented in New York City at the time. His efforts were ultimately attacked on the white supremacy that plagues the nation to this day. The Clemente provides residency to 12 organizations in residence and 33 artists in residence that align with their mission. And outside of the organizations, communities can rent out these spaces as long as it aligns with the Clemente's mission of inclusivity and Puerto Rican and Latinx culture, even the mission of cultural diversity throughout the Lower East Side. They also hold events that foster community engagement like art exhibitions, workshops, cultural films, artistic conversations, and poetry slams. Apart from the office tasks, from updating calendars and writing on social media, I was given the opportunity to write blog posts about 2 installations, one of them being Transformation, Objects, and Relation. I had the pleasure of interviewing Onika Russell and Katrina Dykers. They're right there in the corner screen. It was such an awesome interview. They're actually a part of an organization called Tide Rising Arts Project, and their mission is to promote and preserve Caribbean contemporary art. So that was beautiful to see on their side. My second blog post was about La Tierra Prometida, or the Promised Land, and it was by the photographer and artist in residence, Brian Buckley. He used La Tierra Prometida as an illumination of Clemente Soto Valles' poem, La Tierra Prometida, number 18. It's a whole book, and he got inspired by one of those poems. And one of the bricks, I'm not too sure if you can see. So this is a brick. You might see it across New York City. He has many across the nation, and you can follow his page once you find one. And it's an incredible installation that you could still see today at the Clemente Soto Valles Cultural Education Center. So I began this research based on noticing the importance of cultivating, presenting, and preserving culture and access to the arts. When I was younger, I loved to dance, but I wasn't able to due to my family's income. As I grew older, I realized that many people within my community not only shared that same experience, but those who were able to attend those classes found that their culture wasn't as valued or wasn't as important as Eurocentric values. So in my research methods class last fall, we had an opportunity to do our own research, and I discovered I decided to research the relationship between class and how Afro-descendant dancers talk about dance and access to dance. Through qualitative interviews, I found that Black dancers feel that Black dance isn't devalued throughout the dance industry, and without financial support, opportunities to succeed were limited. Overall, Black dancers fear for their success in the field because their appearance is not exemplary of the Eurocentric look that the industry currently craves, and they demand recognition of Black culture within dance styles. Eurocentric values are heavily incorporated into the way that artistry is viewed as viable. It secretes into deciphering what is understood as art and what is not. Conceptualizing this as a fact in present society can be discouraging to artists of color to embark on a career in art that may not include Eurocentric ideals. Cultural preservation allows for future generations to compose their own self-determination. They are empowered to define and identify themselves by knowing who they are through the most influential elements in society, which is art. Art has the ability to give rise to thoughts that spark movement, as Lau was saying, arts and activism, and encourage unification. Cultural preservation through art develops the fact that people are morally and legally entitled to have complete authority to live as human beings. This dictates the meaningful ways in which they decide to contribute to human history and allows them to have a deep understanding of their cultural and historical heritage. So, my question for the Clemente was, how did the Clemente build and promote a foundation that values both the arts and preserves culture? This question led into many supplementary questions, like how did the Clemente plan events, manage their finances, and take consequential steps that allowed them to establish itself in Loisaida? How did the Clemente advertise and grow its platform within the first 5 years to engage their audience and communities and organizations? What images of Puerto Rican and Latinx culture did they encourage? And how did artists and residents at the Clemente and people who've been at the Clemente closer to its founding in 1993 feel or talk about its growth? I aim to understand the formative formulation of the Clemente and how that allowed them to be a renowned institution in the Lower East Side that they are today. In order to conduct my research, I conducted semi-structured interviews in person and virtually with artists and residents and staff present at the Clemente closer to 1993. These interviews resulted into a deeper and complex understanding of Puerto Rican culture, specifically in its multi-layered identity in the Caribbean, and also a conclusion and request by artists and residents and staff to elaborate on the community outreach of the Clemente. So in the Clemente's case, this answer is very multifaceted and very complex. It has a really unique founding. The founders, Ed Vega Yanque, Nelson Landru, and Mateo Gomez, worked together to emulate the spirit of Clemente Sotovalez after the building had been enduring hardship with squatting and ownership rights. There was an organization that owned the building before, and then the city was trying to tear it down. The mayor was trying to turn it down, but then they got more involved into the New York City cultural affairs, so that helped them become an organization and have subsidized rent after that. But then that led to some disputes over artists in residence and organizations in residence and the board of directors about who actually owned the building and who was actually promoting the culture and promoting the mission statement of the building. So through the word of mouth, headstrong leadership of Ed Vega, Nelson Landru, and Mateo Gomez, the transition to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the Clemente was able to better serve the community. They're now underneath Libertad Guerrera, and she is an incredible human being, and I worked with her closely, and artists and residents also believed her leadership could bring the Clemente more outreach than before. The first few events by the Clemente were set up by artists and organizations and residents that advertised by word of mouth and opened up their own studios to have exhibitions and utilize their own space. Currently, as Loisaida is changing, the Clemente is adapting to focus on more so diasporic representations of the Caribbean and include work that has international lens with specific themes. For example, there was an exhibition called Good and Bad Government, and that focused on how representations of good government could also be viewed as bad, but in a really international lens, so across countries. For example, the US has a sector of the organization of the government that want to take out landmines, but then another part of the U.S. government is like trying to instill them into other countries. So that's how that works in the U.S. context. Yeah. So currently, I am now in the sociology honors program where I'm able, where I'm able to extend my research, and I'm so happy about that because now, instead of it just being the Clemente, I'm able to do various organizations and how they cultivate and preserve culture and a specific definition of what that means through the arts. My research question is, how did each organization build and promote a foundation that values both the arts and preserves cultures? I intend on doing the same thing, holding meetings over Zoom and holding meetings in person like I did with the Clemente. This experience has brought me so much joy and gratitude. Thank you to my fellow fellows. Thank you to Connor. Thank you to Gianpaolo. Thank you to Sam for so much patience and grace throughout this process. A huge shout out to Cheryl Antonia, who guided me in ways that I could not even imagine. And also to Chris, Andrea, Libertad, and Angel at the Clemente for accepting me into the community with open arms. Thank you, everyone.